Have you ever needed to record a video or do a project where the turnaround time was very, very quickly? Or are you just sometimes really lazy and you don't want to deal with the hassle of color space transforms and color correction, color grading in post? Don't you wish you could just press record and just have the footage look really, really good straight out of camera? Well, if you own an a7S III or any modern Sony camera that has 10-bit color and picture profiles, then I'm going to show you how to do just that. I'm going to show you the picture profile that is going to make your life so much easier when you're doing content creation. But before I tell you what that picture profile is and how to set it up, because it isn't just built into the camera, you actually have to set it up inside the camera, and I will show you how to do that a little later in the video. Let me show you some of the footage that I got out of this picture profile. And mind you, this is all straight out of camera. The only adjustments I did were slight exposure and white balance. So here's that footage. I personally think that that looks really, really slick. It looks really good. Dynamic range still looks great. Some of those clips I had slightly overexposed, and so all I did was bring down the exposure just a little bit and actually saved some of the highlights. So the dynamic range was still awesome. Let's go ahead and jump into the picture profiles on my a7S III, and I'll show you how to set this up. In picture profile 1, I have that set to Sony S-Log3, S-Gamut 3.Cine, and then everything else is standard. And that's actually how I would normally film a video. But again, for the purpose of today's video and even future projects that I might do, I wanted to see if I could create a picture profile that would basically do all the work for me so that I didn't have to do any work in post. Or at least if I did, it was only adjusting white balance and exposure, things that often have to be changed regardless of the picture profile that you shoot in, just because of crazy lighting scenarios or whatever it might be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to picture profile 2, and this is what I currently have set up inside of picture profile 2. What I've done is I've set the black level to -15, which is the maximum. Basically tells it not to lift the shadows at all. Pre-records the shadows already nice and dark. Then the gamma we're going to set to S-Cinetone. And I chose S-Cinetone because I think S-Cinetone has the most pleasing colors versus just shooting without a picture profile. Shooting without a picture profile tends to make skin tones look a bit funky. Also S-Cinetone for color mode. But right here, we're going to go to black gamma and we're going to set it to wide. And now what this is it's basically just adjusting again. It's more adjustments in the shadows or blacks of the image. And narrow, middle, and wide, what those do is that basically tells it like, okay, how far into the like shadows, the blacks, shadows, and then darkish tones do you want it to reach. When you set wide, then it's going to reach into even tiny bits of the midtones almost to be able to darken those sections, because we just want to add as much contrast as we can as well, because even S-Cinetone as it stands, even though it's a more color ready profile, S-Cinetone is actually quite flat. So we're going to go to wide, and then we're going to also set it to -7. And now knee, I don't mess with knee. I just leave it on auto. From what I can tell, knee is just basically how much you're capping the highlights. Imagine you're inside of DaVinci Resolve and you're on the color page. You're actually just grabbing the curve and bringing down the top of the image, and you're capping basically the amount of dynamic range you can have in the highlights. So I don't mess with that personally, just because I don't like the way that it looks. Saturation, I found that the most natural amount of saturation is about +20. Because again, S-Cinetone by itself is actually pretty flat as far as profiles go. Color phase, I don't mess with this at all. It's basically like the tint of the colors. If you want your oranges to look a little bit more tan or a little bit more pink, but I just left that as is. Sony's new color science coupled with the S-Cinetone color mode, I think already looks incredible for skin tones. Color depth, I didn't change these either. So from my eyes, what I can see as far as what color depth does, it just changes essentially the brightness of each individual color channel. Not a very technical explanation, but this is just anecdotal based on how I perceive what it does, and that looked like what it was doing to me. We're gonna go ahead and leave that at 0. And detail, I left mine at 0, but I know a lot of people like to eliminate the sharpening that Sony does. So you could do like a -4 or something like that, and it would look really good. And then if you wanted to add sharpening in post, you're welcome to do that. And that is basically it. That's what I use to set up this color profile, and I personally think it looks freaking-tastic. Now, when would you use this versus using something like Sony S-Log3? I can think of a few scenarios. If you have to have an extremely fast turnaround time, then I think using this S-Cinetone profile with the contrast and color added is a great option. Another situation would be if you need to shoot and edit the video on like a mobile device. So like, for example, I have my Galaxy Tab S8. This is an incredible tablet with a very powerful processor. The footage that comes straight out of my A7S III, the XAVC-S codec, I can actually decode on this tablet, which uses the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. However, if I try to add any color effects or anything like that to the clip, it really starts to chug, and it'll just say like, oh, timeline is too complicated. On Samsung devices, they actually just released LumaFusion. So if you need to have a really fast turnaround time, and let's say all you have is like a phone or a tablet, you need to edit a reel or a small project for somebody, and you don't have a laptop computer, or you can't go back to your workstation computer, then this is an excellent option for that, because the colors and contrast and all that are going to look really good straight out of camera. Another excellent use for this would be live streaming or broadcast scenarios. Now, I know the A7S III isn't necessarily a broadcast camera, but it definitely has that full-sized HDMI port that will allow you to go out to an HDMI input, and then you could broadcast that. So if you're doing a live stream using this camera, it's an excellent option to be able to just have it go directly into that with a nice, pleasantly saturated and contrasty image. So another reason is if you are a beginner. Nailing exposure and being able to get your image to look good is actually easier if you can read on your camera on the screen what your image looks like. So I recently sold my field monitor to go on my camera because funny enough, the HDMI port on my A7S III actually doesn't work anymore. It's broken. I need to get it fixed. I need to use my phone as a monitor for my camera. But the problem with that is that my phone doesn't have a display gamma assist mode like my camera does. So if I'm shooting an S-Log3, the image that I see, or the preview that I see on my phone, is going to be flat, and it's going to be hard to nail exposure and white balance if I don't have, a clear image of what it looks like. And so if I'm using like the Sony Imaging Edge app, and I have the S-Cinetone profile set up, then it looks nice and punchy and contrasty on my phone, and I can see the problem areas of maybe if I'm overexposing or something like that. Some scenarios where I personally wouldn't use this, and that would be something like a wedding. Shooting in Sony S-Log3, you would use that to maximize your dynamic range. I wouldn't want to give up the amazing dynamic range in those colors just for the sake of having an easy turnaround time. It could save you some time in post, but some of the fun is being able to edit and push that image as far as you can. I think S-Log3 is a bit better for that. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. Like and subscribe. And again, comment down below your thoughts on this topic. And I will see you in the next video.